And yeah, not a whole lot to go on from last night for me. Just congrats to the winners is all. Anything else you want to mention there?
No, not a whole lot. I mean, one thing I do want to mention is Brian Rust joining the Pittsburgh second line. The winner actually, Robbie, in our Slack chat had Pittsburgh 2 in his lineup. Rust was a late swap with Kasperi Kapanen at warmups, and I think Brian Rust being on that line is going to do a lot for Malkin. You look at their numbers the last few years. Rust has really good numbers with Malkin. Malkin has good numbers with Rust. Something to keep in mind moving forward because Malkin has looked pretty bad all season. Finally kind of showed through last night, 4 shots, couple assists. I think that Pittsburgh 2 should probably be back on our radar now that Brian Rust is on that second line.
Yeah, I thought maybe the late swap would get us there. Early goal, tip in, Crosby from Kapanen. I thought the people that redid all their lineups and made adjustments when there were late changes, and it was a team that I think a lot of us were on in Pittsburgh, thought we might get rewarded there, but Toronto put an end to that very quickly. It was basically over at the end of the first, and then I think Thornton got another goal, or he got the 3-point bonus, and it was like, all right, well, close the laptop if you didn't have all the Joe Thornton. And I had some Toronto onslaughts, but a lot of them had Tavares in them, like a couple of Josh Sacks, and so did not work out. But good 4-gamer today. Initial thoughts on this one? I mentioned it's pretty news intensive, but what are some things you're looking at off the jump here?
Yeah, that's the first thing is that news is going to be coming. Just a couple minutes ago, I saw something about Winnipeg lines, and we'll talk about that later. Winnipeg might be changing things up. Calgary is certainly going to change things up. Detroit has Evgeny Svechnikov maybe coming into the lineup tonight. Vladimir Nemestikov is out for Detroit. He was on their top power play unit. So being around, the nice thing is that we don't have a ton of games, so you don't have to be there 7 Eastern and 7:30 Eastern and 8 Eastern. You just have to check in a couple times through the night to make sure you're not missing anything major. But other than that, what's jumping out to me is usually when we get these Canadian slates, and I call them Canadian slates when we have 3 or 4 games and half of them or more are Canadian teams. Usually you'll just see a ton of ownership on those teams, and justifiably so. If you look at the goal scoring columns for teams or for players or whatever, it's just littered with Canadian teams and Canadian players because a lot of teams are bad defensively up here and there's a lot of talent. But if you look at the other games, like Chicago going into Carolina, those are 2 teams who have a ton of goal scoring. We've seen Carolina just a couple nights ago, absolutely just catch fire and put up a big night. Carolina right now is 6th by 5-on-5 goal scoring. Chicago is a little bit lower, but they have Kane, they have DeBrincat. Suter kind of, looks like a player. Dominik Kubalik continues to be one of the best goal scorers in hockey. So there are a lot of different spots you can go on the slate. There's the obvious, right? Anytime Connor McDavid is on a slate, he's going to draw a lot of ownership and a lot of attention. But there are several, a dozen viable lines across these 4 games or more that I think people should be looking at. And that's what interests me on this slate is it's not like a Minnesota Anaheim game where you can just say, maybe I'll one-off Bat Dumba and then move along or something like that. Or maybe I'll play John Gibson and I'll move along. You have to pay attention to all the lines and all the players in each of these games because they all have, a lot of scoring upside, especially on specific lines.
Yeah, a lot of options is another thing. Yeah, so I noticed that same thing. I think you can make a case for pretty much every team tonight, if not every team. There's not just, a game that you just kind of discard here for sure. So I think some interesting discussion to be had on each and every one of these 4. Eric Hofbrau, once again, had a massive night. He says he won the secondary 333 on FanDuel and got second in the Twine on DK, won some single entries as well. He said he took home about $20K in total. Couldn't have done it without the mods and the members in Slack. Shout out to Eric. Very generous with his $100 super chat. I think that's the biggest one we've gotten this year, but he's been on just an absolute heater for 3 weeks, it feels like. At least a couple weeks. Showdown, Classic, he does it all. So Congrats, Eric, and we appreciate the super chats. As always, if you guys want to help us out in other ways, feel free to like the video. That helps us a ton and makes Cliffy and I look good for the bosses. And then subscribe to the channel as well. We've got a bunch of content for NBA, PGA, MMA coming on this weekend as well. And then NHL shows. So you'll be notified if you hit the notification bell when all of our shows go live, or we have a new upload. Jason Roslin doing some short form stuff for PGA. Josh Engelman, you guys know him. Awesemo OG. He's pumping out a bunch of content throughout the day, as well as joining strategy shows, live before locks, all that stuff. So lots happening, and the best way to help us out is by subscribing to the channel. Really quick premium content for today that we got going on is the NHL projections. So if you're not a member yet, NHL projections are free. Feel free to use those, sort by value, pop in a couple of our top values, and fill out the rest of your lineup if you're hand building, or plug them into an optimizer if you have Fantasy Cruncher on your own. Also the NBA big board. If you're playing NBA today, you will not be shorted for content. I know our producer Tyler is looking forward to a long night of producing NBA shows. He is nodding his head in agreement behind the scenes there. And then MMA rankings as well. We've got those for free today. So we're playing MMA. Go check those out. See who Alex's top plays are going into the weekend. Let's start with the first couple games at 7 Eastern. Just two locking here. We'll start with Chicago and Carolina. We've got a 2.6 implied total for the Hawks, 3.5 for the Hurricanes. It's going to be Kevin Lankinen and James Reimer in net. And relatively new Chicago lines. So it's going to be Suter, DeBrincat, Kane that we've seen before. Strome, Kubalik, and Brandon Hagel. He was a guy I played way too much of the other night for whatever reason. I don't know why. And then on the Carolina side, Aho, Teravainen, Brock McGinn, normal Carolina 2, Netchus with Trocheck and Niederreiter, Stahl, Svechnikov, Fogle. Carolina, really deep team. But is there anything on the Chicago side you would be looking to attack here? Or how would you attack the Blackhawks if you had them at all?
Yeah, so one thing I want to mention about Chicago is that they did run different power play units at practice yesterday. Carl Soderberg had been on the top PP unit. That looks like it's changing now. Looks like he's getting pushed off, and Ryan Carpenter is going to join the top power play. So it'll look something like DeBrincat, Kane, Strome, Carpenter with Adam Bokvist running the blue line. So Nicholas Baudin isn't on the top power play anymore, and that's a little bit of a problem, specifically on DraftKings tonight, because Adam Bokvist has been listed as a winger on some lineup sites, because when teams go with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, the lineup sites will just put the winger or the extra defenseman up in the forwards just to make it an even 12 and 6. But then DraftKings recognizes those players as a forward and lists them as such. So Adam Bokvist, despite him being the power play 1 quarterback defenseman, is listed as a winger on DraftKings. So you can get more. It allows you to get a bit more creative with your stacks. Like you can do double defenseman stacks from a different team now. You can use more one-off defensemen. Not having to put them in with a stack or something like that. So it doesn't really take away a whole lot from your stacking, but what it'll change is how you attack Chicago, because Bokvist, DeBrincat, and Kane are all wingers on DK. So if you have them all, you might be struggling to find a double center somewhere else, or you're going to be using one-off centers or maybe 2 one-off centers. So I find myself when I'm in my Chicago lineups, I find myself going to a lot of 4 and 5 mans, not so much 3 mans, and it's just a fact of having Bokvist as a winger. Like I don't like having to look for double centers elsewhere. Like you can do it. But I think like the best one might be like Dylan Larkin or Robbie Fabry or something like that. It's just not an appealing situation. So most of my Chicago, I have Strome in with Kane and DeBrincat because I need a center there. I'm using Bokvist a lot because he's a cheap, he's a cheap quote unquote winger to use. Ryan Carpenter, Like, I think he's fine to put in as a one-off. I think he's fine to put in with your Chicago stacks, but he's definitely not a guy you got to rush in to stuff into your lineups. He's not a great player. He's more just like a body in front of the net, trying to cause some disturbance and let the other players kind of work around him. So you can put in Carpenter. I don't think it's necessary to absolutely shove him in. So that's kind of where I'm going. Kevin Lankin in net for Chicago is one of my favorite plays on the entire slate, for in net anyway, because Carolina's one of the heavy shot volume teams in the league. Now, of course, that's the double-edged sword. You know, if you face a ton of shots, could let up a ton of goals and find him hooked after about 10 minutes, but he could also face a ton of shots and, you know, save 37 of 38 for the win. I'm kind of hoping it's the latter here. So Lankinen's price is getting me over to him a little bit here tonight. On the Carolina side, I have a lot of interest in that Trocheck, Necas, Niederreiter line. To my eyes, like, they've just been outstanding this year. Vincent Trocheck looks like the player of 2 or 3 years ago. Nino Niederreiter looks like the player he was when he first came over from Carolina. Martin Necas, like, he might not be a household name, might not be super popular among some DFSers, but like he has a lot of playmaking skill, let's say. And Niederreiter and Trocheck are great shooters. Like, I just think it's a very good chemistry line. And they typically don't see anywhere near top competition from the opposition. Like, Jordan Stahl's line will probably play up against the Brinkat and Kane. Aho and Teravainen will take some sort of mix of the second and third lines, and then Carolina 3 will take some sort of mix of the third and fourth lines. And once you get into the depth of the Chicago team, I think that's where a lot of damage can be done. So I have a ton of interest. Trocheck, Niederreiter, Necas. Even if you just want to do a two-man of like Niederreiter, Necas, and Gardner, it's a pretty cheap two-man. You can get it in for like 10, 11K, and it allows you access to the way expensive stacks that we have later, particularly Edmonton power play. So I'm not going to begrudge anybody for using literally any of the Carolina lines, but I'm going to focus on that third line because I think A, it's a great matchup, and B, there's a two-man there that I can use for my expensive stacks later. So it's just, I'm focusing more on Carolina 3 because it's a function of the way I'm building my lineups tonight. But if anybody wants to use the Aho Teravainen line, I'm not going to say anything against it. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I think Carolina's pretty simple for me. It's just however much I can get with them is fine for me. Like, there's 3 lines you can make a case for. I think I agree that the Trocheck line looks to be in the best matchup. You just don't get the top power play correlation because Carolina is so split between their top 3 lines. So those are like the only holes I can poke in the Trocheck line. If I'm going to Chicago, I think the Strome line is probably going to see the most of the Aho Teravainen line, which isn't stellar defensively. And, that second line is pretty cheap. If you just want to go Strome, Kubelik, that's fine. But not a whole lot of interest in the Suter, Brinkat, Kane line. They started off really hot with good numbers for like their first 4 or 5 games. And now they're just closer to like league average at 5-on-5. So I've cooled on them a bit. I think it's just a really tough matchup. And I would be like bypassing like Winnipeg and some of the Vancouver lines as well. And like McDavid, if you're going to Chicago, top line. So can't really prioritize them there. You mentioned before the show, Connor Murphy. Do you know if he's going to be back? Did we get confirmation?
I haven't been able to find anything. All I saw was that he was skating this morning. They had 8 defensemen on the ice. If I were to make an educated guess right now whether he's going to be in or out, I'm going to guess Murphy doesn't play tonight and probably plays some, their next game. But he could play tonight. Just be aware of that.
Yeah, and I'll have projections updated for that. So just be aware. FC is going to move very quickly tonight with only 4 games. So if you're worried about getting your stacks in there, have no fear. You'll have plenty of time in 20 minutes or so. Dougie, very popular, 6,800. He's kind of the premier defenseman, I think, tonight. Scrolling through some of these other guys and the other teams, like, the power play 1 quarterbacks, you got Hughes, Morrissey, Tyson Berry, Valimaki. He's cheap, I guess, but like not a lot of these guys I would be willing to play as a one-off. And so Dougie looks to be the best one-off defenseman for me tonight. The problem is just he's going to be heavily owned because I think you can play him with pretty much any of the Carolina lines for power play or 5-on-5 correlation. So Like Dougie tonight, he'll probably be my highest owned defenseman or one of them. But yeah, just know that he's going to have a decent amount of ownership. The rest of these guys on Carolina, it would just be like a sprinkle here and there for the rest of their defensemen. I'm not seeing anyone that I love. I guess maybe Gardner for 2,600 is okay. You mentioned him for the secondary power play time that he gets. Maybe goes a little bit better with the Niederreiter niches 2-man. Anything else in this game? What about $8,300 Reimer? We're showing heavy ownership on him on DK. You think he's going to see enough volume?
No, I would not. Like, I'm not. I just texted him out initially, like right away as soon as I saw his price. For me, like if you want to play him in your correlated lineups, et cetera, I'm not going to argue with that. But for me, Chicago is near the bottom of the list in shot rate of 5-on-5 this year. Carolina's one of the best defensive teams. Like, I'd be pretty surprised if Reimer sees 30 shots.
Yeah, I'm coming in closer to like 15% on Reimer, and we've gotten like 30% owned. So he might not be that highly owned just because, I think most people are catching on that the cheaper goalies and the mid-price goalies that are going to see volume are the better plays. And so, like, if you're one-offing a goalie here, it's probably Lankinen, and you just hope that he can get that save bonus. Might even be okay in a loss here, depending on how much volume Carolina puts up, because it's looking ugly for some of these other teams defensively. And Chicago hasn't actually been too bad defensively so far this season, which is a little bit surprising. Let's go to Florida and Detroit. 3.2 implied total for the Panthers, 2.4 for the Red Wings. Drager and Grice are your expected goalies. The question here, and we'll know this 20 minutes before lock, so that's the good thing, is are Larkin and Mantha going to be back together? What do you think? Do you think they're going to be back together to start this game?
I mean, I'm making my lineups assuming that he went to the top power play unit, but it's just like, how much longer can they keep Anthony Mantha away from Dylan Larkin on the power play? Because this has been going on all season, and their power plays at the bottom of the league. Like, it's just shocking to me that they've gone in over a month with just an abysmal power play, and they're just running it back the same thing over and over. I guess I shouldn't say it shocks me because it's Jeff Blashill. If it was like 28 other coaches, I would be shocked, but not from him. Anyways, so that's the problem here, is that if the warm-up started, Mantha's on line 2, then he's not with Larkin at 5-on-5, and he's not with Larkin on the power play. Now you're just playing completely uncorrelated and broken play, which could work out. But it's just something people are going to have to be cognizant of. And I'm just like, I'm willing to make, switch arounds 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 of my 20 lineups if I have to, at 6:30 Eastern if we get something different. But for now, I'm assuming top line Larkin, Zadina, and Mantha, with a second line coming in of Fabry, Ryan, and Svechnikov. Now, what the Red Wings have been doing with their matchups a lot this year is sending out the Nielsen and Ernie line up against the top competition. And that means Barkov, Duclair, Verhaeghe for the Panthers. And that Nielsen Ernie line, it's, they're fine defensively. They're about an average line. So we'll see how they do against Florida 1. But what that does is it opens up the Red Wings first and second lines against the depth from Florida. And that's where they can really be had. Like, that top line for Florida is excellent. The top pair for Florida is excellent. The depth from Florida, forward and defense, not so much. So, we're showing a lot of ownership on Detroit, and that's what's really worrying me here, is that we have Larkin, Mantha, Zadina as a line in our top stacks coming in at 24%, which, like, I get it because they're cheap and you can fit them in with other top stacks, but, like, if Dylan Larkin and Anthony Mantha are 25% owned on a 4-game slate, like, I'd say fading them is very viable, especially where they may be split on the power play. So, like, I hate to say it, but there's just so much up in the air here that I don't have a solid read on this game. So I'll just tell you guys exactly what I'm doing with my lineups. I have a bunch of Larkin, Zadina, Mantha, or some combination of them with Filip Hronek, because Filip Hronek jumped to the top power play unit over Christian Juice last game. So that's one thing to note, is that Hronek looks like he's going to be running the top power play. So I'm just running a bunch of Larkin, Zadina, Mantha, Hronek lineups. And if I have to change them up at 6:30, then I have to change them up. On the Florida side, I'm staying away from Florida 1. I'm not going to begrudge anybody for playing them. They just didn't get into my mix today. I'm going back to Florida 3, because they're probably going to see that second line from the Red Wings, and the second line from the Red Wings, if Mantha isn't there, has been not that great this year. So Luostarinen, Vetrano, Tippett, take a 2-man out of there to fit in your Edmonton stacks. That's kind of where I'm looking at. On the blue line, I have John Merrill as a punt for Detroit, because he is playing on the top pair. He's under 3K, so he's fine for a punt. But for me, it's basically just Hronek in my Detroit 1 lineups. I have some Strawman in my Florida, secondary stacks. That's about it. And I have some Chris Driedger as well, but I don't feel super good about that, because I don't like taking goalies on the road, especially expensive goalies on the road against a team that doesn't put up a huge shot volume. But I think Driedger honestly has the best chance of a shutout here tonight.
That's fair enough. I mean, with Detroit, it's like, I like it. In the top line, if this is going to be correct, it is a guess right now, whether Larkin and Mantha are going to be together. Especially, I think it's always a guess with Detroit. You just never know. They were put together towards the latter half of the game a couple nights ago. So that's where we're getting this educated guess from, but we haven't seen anything online. So be ready to adjust. If they are together and this ownership sticks, I mean, even if they're around 20%, not 25, I don't think I'm going to be over the field on Detroit. I like Larkin as a one-off. I like Mantha as a one-off, and I like them as a 2-man if they are together in pregame skate. But the power plays, like, you're not going to know if Mantha's on the top power play going into this game regardless. They put Nemestikov and I don't even know a bunch of clowns ahead of him in the past. So his power play 1 spot is very assumed here. It is not confirmed. I think my favorite thing in this game from an ownership perspective is this Florida top line. Reasonable ownership. I think they're kind of in no man's land tonight in terms of their price. They're around, like, there's a lot of good value lines elsewhere. That Winnipeg, Vancouver game, bunch of value there. The next game we'll talk about, depending on what Calgary does, there's some value there. And they're just kind of getting squeezed out, or they're not getting the most attention. And people will leave off Carter Verhaeghe at 5,100. He's not on the top power play. So he's getting pretty like 4 or 5% lower ownership than Barkov and Duclair currently. And they've just been awesome at 5-on-5. So you could go with the full line stack. You could go with Barkov, Duclair, and Hornquist or Huberdeau. I think there's a number of options on the Florida side. You could go to Florida too with our boy Wenberg. I always just limit him. I never X him out because it's like the Joe Thornton thing. Like, there's going to be a Wenberg night at some point this season. You could argue there's been 3 of them. I think he had goals in 3 straight games. He just doesn't attempt enough shots. So really hard for those guys to be on winning lineups, but it does happen every once in a while. So play Wenberg at your own risk, as always. I do like Huberdeau and Hornquist, which is the problem. So maybe just use those 2 guys as a 2-man and find your cheap center elsewhere.
Yeah, so Jonathan Huberdeau, I want to talk about him for a sec, because I wrote something up about him for Dauber Hockey. I'm going to post next week. Anyways, I just want to talk about Huberdeau's incoming regression that's going to happen this season. He's shooting 40% on the power play. He's never shot above 20% in any season. Team is scoring 15.5 goals per 60 minutes with him on the ice, about 50% higher than any previous season. He's shooting 33% at 5-on-5. He's never been above 14% in any season. Is an on-ice shooting rate over 12%, and he's never been above 11.5% for a season. An individual expected goals rate of 0.37, which would be good if he was a defenseman, and an individual points percentage of 100%, meaning he's gotten a point on every goal that's been scored with him on the ice. Like, I like Huberdeau. I think it's one of those things, like, you don't know when the regression is going to hit. That's the thing about regression. It could come today. It could come in 3 weeks. But Huberdeau is going to go through, like, a super extensive cold spell. And, like, it's got to be – like, these numbers are just bonkers. Like, out of control, out of line. I don't know how that regression doesn't start hitting soon. And like it worries me. And that's kind of the reason why I'm not I hate that my gut is kind of keeping me off of Florida, but that's kind of the reason why I'm not on the Florida top 6 tonight, is that there are like 6 or 8 like glaring, like flashing red lights saying that Huberdeau's production is just going to crash, and it's worrying me. That's my piece here.
I mean, yeah, the question, like you said, is just whether or not the regression comes now or in 10 games from now or 20 games from now, or maybe he just starts to play better and still produces at a high rate. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we'd all be
with Alex Wenberg as a center,
an elite center. I know. I mean, I'm not surprised putting up these type of numbers. Elite Alex Wenberg centering him. That is a joke, everybody, or if you're listening on podcasts and can't tell. The rest of this game, you've got the double power play one defenseman on the Florida side, Ekblad, Yandel. I prefer Ekblad, but $1,400. Cheaper is Yandel, so I always end up with more of him than I think I'm going to at first look. On the Red Wing side, it's just chronic for me. I think Josh is watching the show. Maybe he wants to jump on and tout some Mark Stahl for $2,500. Anyone else cheap in this game that you're targeting on the blue line?
Oh,
like Merrill, actually. I think Merrill's fine.
Yeah, John Merrill at $2,900. Yeah. I don't mind him. He's actually having a pretty good season. I think he might be a reason why Detroit's turning it around. But over 20 minutes, 3 straight games, 23 minutes last game. So if you need a punt, there you go.
Josh says, how dare you? Clayton says, I can end hot streaks by simply rostering whomever may be hot. Well, I mean, that is a power in itself. I'm sure you could make some money. If you
I'll give you $50 if you roster Huberdeau tonight.
50? I don't know that. I think I would pay more than 50. I don't know. Hit me up, Clayton. We'll chat after the show. Anything else in this game?
No, that's it for me.
I think we're good there. Just pay attention to the Detroit lines. If they are, as we were expecting, Larkin, Mantha, Zadina, Fabry, Ryan, Brome, it's going to be a lot of 2-mans for me. I am mixing in some 3-2-1s, some 5-2-1s because it is a shorter slate rather than
Brome might be scratched. One of the wingers is getting scratched because Svechnikov might be in tonight. So there you go.
All right. Be on the lookout for that. Just wanted to point out we do have a new-ish Twitter account, Awesemo NHL, if you guys want to check out for some highlights. They post some funny stuff, some fights, as well as important news for DFS and some betting news as well. If you want to keep on top of that, the best news you're going to find is, and the most recent stuff is in Slack, though. So if you want to join, awesemo.com/join. We've got an NHL weekly pass for $11.95 per week. Hit me up if you've got questions about any packages. This show will go on podcast after the show. I mentioned if you're a podcast listener, all of our shows, our strategy shows, go up on the Awesemo Podcast Network. And if you want to have a chance to win a free month of Awesemo Plus, you just got to give us a 5-star rating and then, very importantly, review us. That helps us climb the charts of Apple Podcasts, which we're trying to do. We're trying to build up our podcast network. And then going back to Twitter, we're approaching 30,000 followers on Twitter. We need your help, and we're not asking for your help for free. If you want to win some free stuff, potentially give us a follow. We're giving away 30 free weekly passes to our followers at Awesemo_com. So there you go. Go do that kind of stuff. Tyler's got it up on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Edmonton and Calgary. This is a 9 p.m. Eastern start. They just can't get the staggered starts figured out. I'm just realizing again, like, start a game at 7 Eastern, start a game at 7:30 Eastern. Then they're like, when you turn on NHL Network, there it is. There's the green screen. We did it. We made it halfway through the show. Yeah. You just got a new camera, didn't you?
Yeah, I just bought one 2 mornings ago.
All right. So it's something to do with the connection. It's not the camera. We'll get that figured out. But YouTube chat's about to go wild here in a few seconds. They love when your screen turns green out of nowhere. So
well, now they're going to be on Calgary and Edmonton tonight.
True. This may be like Josh's dogs barking. This is the game stack to win everything. Edmonton, Calgary, 3.1 implied total for the Oilers, 3.3 for the Flames. Mike Smith, and it's going to be David Riddick. Is it Riddick or Riddich?
Riddick. Like Chronicles Riddick, yeah.
All right.
I guess you don't watch movies.
No, I don't. I only watch DFS. I actually just stare at my phone all night and hope my little circles on DK can go towards the right. Calgary took a beating the other night against Vancouver. Their coach said that they're probably going to make some changes, whether that means someone comes out, someone comes in, like just very vague. Problem is this game does not start right at lock. So we're going with some educated guesses. How are you approaching the Calgary side? I think the Edmonton side's easy. It's, McDavid, whether or not you want to play him, he's expensive, but they're fully correlated on the top power play. You got Draisaitl as well. Like Edmonton is probably the easiest team in the world to talk about for like the past 4 years of DFS when McDavid's healthy. How are you treating Calgary though?
Yeah, I think right out of the gate, I'm going to say I'm not playing Tkachuk Lindholm. Tkachuk Lindholm, and I'm assuming it's going to be Andrew Mangiapane. That line has been playing really well. I don't think they'll break up a line playing well just because they got smashed. I think if you're going to see changes, might be the Gaudreau or the Dubé or the Lucic line, sorry. But Tkachuk, Lindholm, and Mangiapane, assuming, are probably going to go into McDavid and Nugent Hopkins, Puljujarvi in that matchup. And honestly, that Oilers top line has just been a meat grinder defensively this year. Like McDavid got slagged for years for being poor defensively, and now his defensive impacts are just through the roof. Like it was
he's
like
got the puck the whole time he's on the ice.
Yeah, but like his defensive impacts are kind of crazy. It's like that Michael Jordan meme, right? It's like he heard everybody talking crap about him defensively, and he took that personally. So now McDavid, Puljujarvi, and Nugent Hopkins, like their defensive numbers are insanely good. 1.6 expected goals against per 60 minutes. Like that's 30% better than the league average. Like we're talking over standard deviation better than the league average. Like it's just not a matchup I want anything a part of. I will say, because Mike Smith's in net, every line's in play. So like, I'm not going to say you're an idiot for playing Lindholm and Tkachuk against Mike Smith. It's just not something I'm playing because I'm avoiding that McDavid, Puljujarvi, Nugent Hopkins matchup. So I have a lot more Monahan, Gaudreau. I do have a fair amount of Monahan, Gaudreau tonight because they should see the second and third lines from Edmonton. Like that second line has just been an absolute dumpster this year for the Oilers. Like their percentages are great. But once those percentages start leveling off, and they will, like, they're just getting pounded defensively. 2.6, 2.7 expected goals against, which is just terrible. Like, we just talked about a line that was 30% better defensively. This is about 30% worse defensively than the league average. Like, they're just getting bailed out by the Oilers' second line is getting bailed out by Oilers goaltending, and that just can't go on much longer. So I'm not super high on Monahan and Gaudreau individually, but as a tandem, you can throw them in like your Vancouver stacks that we're going to get to later. You can throw them in, with Florida 1. You can throw them in with any of the Carolina lines. Like they're a pretty versatile line in that sense tonight. Like we talked about changes coming, but Monahan and Gaudreau almost always play together, so I would be pretty shocked if they get broken up. So it's one of those duos that you can kind of rely on. The offensive numbers for the careers have been, they've been good. They tailed off the last season and a half, and I have some thoughts about that, but we'll save that for another day. I just think it's a good matchup going into that Edmonton second line. So Monahan, Gaudreau. I have Brett Ritchie penciled in as their winger right now because he finished the game with him. He played like their last 3 or 4 shifts the other night with them. Brett Ritchie, 2,500. You can throw him in if you want. Kind of as like if he plays there, then I'll use him. But the problem is that if they bring in like Joakim Nordstrom and he's $100 more expensive, you could be boned, right? So just watch the salaries if you are using any of the non-elite players from Calgary, because you got to make sure you leave enough salary that you could switch out when warm-ups hit. So that's where I'm at on Calgary. On the Edmonton side, Edmonton power play. That's, I'm just 4 and 5 man stacking Edmonton as many ways as I can. Like I have over 50% ownership. McDavid, I'm like 30% Draisaitl. Should mention that again last game, Puljujarvi and Chason split the power play. So if you want to, get a little bit different, save some money, throwing on Alex Chason into your Edmonton power play stacks is just fine. So that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. Edmonton power play, Gaudreau, Monahan. And I also want to mention Rasmus Anderson played the final power play for Calgary in their last game, not Juuso Välimäki. So there's another wrench into those plans because I think Anderson is $900 more expensive on DraftKings. So you might have to put him in there. And then actually you won't even know because we won't know if he's on the power play and warm up. So right now we're just kind of guessing. My guess is that they go back to Rasmus Anderson, top power play. But honestly, it could be Anderson. It could be Välimäki. It could be Giordano. I mean, hell, it could be Noah Hannafin. We just really don't know, and I wish we had a better answer for the listeners, but we don't.
Yep, a lot of uncertainty tonight. Line combos, power plays. One thing is certain, though. Edmonton power play pretty good. You mentioned McDavid. I'm going to try to get overweight on Edmonton 1. I think people are going to have a pretty tough time paying $7,100 for Nugent Hopkins, so he's going to be a guy that I try to force in. Same thing with Draisaitl. I will certainly have some onslaughts going up against Riddick here with Tyson Barrie. It gets very expensive, but there's always some cheap third line 2-mans that you can get to that are at no ownership. So I'm certainly not shying away from the Edmonton power play stack, or just Edmonton 1, which is basically the power play stack with Puljujarvi getting a decent amount of power play 1 time. And the reason I like Edmonton here is because I think there's a pretty good chance Mangiapane isn't on the Lindholm-Tkachuk line. And Lindholm and Tkachuk just haven't been the same with Mangiapane. Whether that's a coincidence or not is, we'll see, I guess, going forward if they get broken up again. But McDavid, matchup proof, that line has just been crushing people, as you said. And, I think Calgary is a team that you got to be careful with. Like, if you just use projections and you're just using shot share from like Lindholm and Tkachuk, they're going to grade out very well from a projection standpoint. But the matchup that they're going to get is not a very good one at all. So I want to be over on Gaudreau and Monahan, or at least, closer to the field on them. If you like Vancouver, if you like Winnipeg better, I'm not going to argue with that. But yeah, I greatly prefer the Monahan and Gaudreau duo. And Brett Ritchie, Alex Baker, one of his favorite guys to play in all of DFS, which is one of the things that stuck with me. Like, one of the first conversations I had with Alex about NHL was like, he loved playing min-salary Brett Ritchie when he was playing with Sagan and Ben back in the day. So I just always remember that when ever Brett Ritchie pops up in the top 6 somewhere. So there you go, Alex. Brett Ritchie.
I swear to God, I've been writing about Brett Ritchie over at Dobber Hockey, season-long fantasy hockey, for like 6 years now. I've been like,
is he good? He's not good, right?
No, I want to say he had like a 17-goal season a few years ago.
That's not bad.
He had a 16-goal season playing 12 minutes a game.
Dang.
Yeah.
Was that on Dallas?
Yeah, and he generally puts up really good shot rates. Like, I would liken him to Luke Cunningham. He'll put up good shot rates, but he can't do anything else.
Okay. He needs quality guys to carry the line.
Right, and the question is, even if he starts the game there, is he going to be there in the third period?
Probably not. I mean, the way that I would like to play Lindholm and Tkachuk would just be if you're going Calgary on the slot. It is Mike Smith in net. You just never know. It's already a game that's random. Throw Mike Smith into the mix. He could look like the greatest goalie ever, or he could let in 4 goals in his first 5 shots. So, and then the Calgary defensemen are a complete mess. I think I like Gio the best, but I have no idea if he's going to be on the top power play, or like you said, Välimäki, Anderson. It could be anyone. So play those guys, I guess, at your own risk. We got to mention Evan Bouchard, by the way. This guy just throws everything at the net. He's 4,900, so we're getting to a spot where, like, is it ridiculous to play him?
Did you see his ice time last game?
What was it?
9 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Probably not then.
They played Nurse and Barrie top pair like 25, and then they played Russell Larson second pair like 20 or 22.
Did they get someone back that game? Why did he fall off a cliff?
Because they just decided to use Russell and Larson as like a second pair shutdown type thing.
Interesting. All right. Well, I mean, if he has another big game for 4,900, I don't know what we're going to do with this guy. But, yeah, I think maybe I need to bump his projection down. It's modest right now, I think, but he's in there for like 17 minutes, I think. So we'll get that fixed. He'll probably be closer to the low teens. I don't know what to do with this guy. At first, I was like, oh, 3K, and this guy's just shooting the puck every time he gets it. But now we're in a little different scenario where he's 4,900 and played 9 minutes last game. Let's go to the last game, and then we will get out of here in about 6 or 7 minutes. We've got the Jets and the Canucks, 3 implied total for the Jets, 3 as well. For the Canucks, basically a pick 'em. Connor Hellebuck probably going for Winnipeg. Thatcher Demko is confirmed for the Canucks. No changes that I'm seeing on the Canucks side. For the Jets, they scrapped their lines pretty early last game, and the lines that I'm seeing on the screen that I just actually saw on Twitter from their morning skate are Scheifele with Connor and Wheeler. So we're familiar with that line's body of work. And then Stastny with Kopp and Ehlers, which was a very good trio as well, and probably gets the better matchup. So what do you like on the Winnipeg side here?
So one thing before we jump into anything, I see we have a super chat from Clayton, actually. Yeah.
Clayton again.
And he asks, for a mid-$3 max on a short slate, would you plan a flag on one line or spread it out? Usually when I play 3 maxes, I'll take like 1 or 2 dominant lines. So like tonight I might take like Edmonton power play or something like that. And then maybe like a Florida top line or something like that, or a Carolina power play. And then I'll mix in like filler stacks with them. So like I'll have, I might do like Edmonton and then 3 filler stacks, or like 2 Edmonton, 1 Florida, and then 3 filler stacks or something like that. So I do spread it out a little bit, but you definitely have to focus down. Like I wouldn't do like 2 teams and then 2 teams and then 2 teams. I think you're spreading yourself far too thin at that point.
I think depending on contest size, I think so. Like I'm thinking about it, like if you're playing the 40-man live final and you have 3 tickets, like what Droopy had last year, I think then you could go 2-2-2.
Yeah.
I think on a slate like this, like I wouldn't mind having 2 guys, like a handful of guys in 2 of the 3 lineups, but I would probably try to differentiate, and I would try to differentiate and correlate my goalies if it made sense as well. Like you don't want to be tying yourself to one goalie on this kind of slate. It's hard to say because every set of games is going to be different, but in general, yeah, I would mostly go with like, if you like 3 different main stacks, start with them, and you could use one of those main stacks as a secondary stack on another line and get like different lineup constructions where in one lineup you're going with an expensive defenseman or a couple of expensive defensemen. On one lineup you're going with 2 cheaper defensemen. So just getting differentiation that way I think is the best way to go. I wouldn't just say I have to go 100% on one line. You might end up there, but most times I would just go on the side of differentiation just for the sake of it.
Yeah, I agree. Like 2 out of 3 type thing.
Yeah. All right. Winnipeg, Vancouver. You like anything on the Winnipeg side? Winnipeg won.
Yeah.
Most popular line of the night.
Yeah. So that's the thing here is Winnipeg One's ownership is pretty high. Scheifele, Connor, Wheeler. Here's the thing is they're not a great 5-on-5 line. If you look at their numbers going back to last year, they're about 45% shot share, expected goal shares. Sorry. If you go back and include 2018-19, it's 47%. Like this is well below a break-even shot share line. And they don't score a ton. Like 2.5 goals per 60 minutes isn't that great. Like it's above average, but it's not elite. And we've talked about Blake Wheeler this week. He just doesn't look like the same player that he was 2 or 3 years ago. He's having a lot of difficult time with zone entries. He looks brutal defensively, and Kyle Connor's not good defensively either. So if that line is, we could see that line just get pinned into their zone, right? And what scares me about this matchup in particular is like Vancouver's kind of starting to turn it around, right? One thing I noted, like we talked about, I think on our last show you and I did together about how the Vancouver top line, Pettersson, Besser, Miller, was starting to look better. And I actually went and looked at their numbers by month so far this season. So Vancouver's top line in the month of January, 2.0 expected goals for per 60, 39% expected goals share. In the month of February, 3.4 expected goals for per 60, 68% expected goals shared. Like, they are just throttling the opponent. Now, the problem here is that they've been using the Pettersson line against the depth. And believe it or not, like, the Pettersson line going up against Stastny, Ehlers, and Kopp is a way worse matchup for them than it going up against Scheifele, Wheeler, and Connor. So I do have a lot of Vancouver power play stacks here tonight because the Winnipeg Jets don't take a lot of penalties, but their penalty kill is atrocious. So, like, if Vancouver can actually get on the power play, if they can get 3 or 4 power plays here tonight, I think they can do a lot of damage against Winnipeg. So, like, a Vancouver power play stack, other than McDavid, is my second most owned stack here tonight. But if I'm going to stack an even strength line out of this game for Vancouver, it's Horvat, Hoglander, and Pearson, because I want to get as much as that Scheifele, Wheeler, Connor match as I can, because they might put up a couple goals, but like I said, they're going to be horrible defensively, and they're going to be running around in their own end for a fair bit of the game. So, put me down for Vancouver power play. I do have interest in Winnipeg 2. Or sorry, not Winnipeg 2, Vancouver 3. I don't know why I said Winnipeg 2. Vancouver 3. Adam Gaudette, his individual expected goal numbers this year are just like bonkers, like out of control, insane, like top 10 in the league with Toffoli and those guys, insane. So Gaudette and Sutter is a little two-man that I have in some of my McDavid lineups, because they should see the depth from Winnipeg, and once you get down to the forwards and the Pionks, there's not a lot to worry about defensively.
Vancouver's my favorite spot of the night, so I'll be heavy on the Vancouver late night hammer. Hellebuck is a very good goalie, so that worries me. Winnipeg just tilts me to no end. He's not?
Oh, it's Brossois.
All right, even better.
Yeah, let's go, baby.
All right, let's do it. Vancouver. I mean, I liked them before against Hellebuck, but if it's going to be Brossois, sounds like it is, then I feel even better about Vancouver. We might be undershooting their ownership just a little bit on some of their top guys, but I don't think they're going to be as popular as Winnipeg. I don't think any Vancouver line is going to be as popular as Winnipeg one. Yeah. So give me some, I'll go with some Winnipeg too, just because they've been really good at 5-on-5. I'll have a ton of the Vancouver figure out a way to not have them going up against Stastny, Kopp, Ehlers at least the whole game. But you get them fully correlated top power play. That is always nice. Throw in Bo Horvat. Certainly going to have some 5-man Vancouver stacks as well. I feel pretty good about this Vancouver side. So hopefully they're not too chalky now that we talked them up so much. But I don't think too many people watch the show that we're going to really sway ownership at all. Someone asked for a hat trick pick on the night. You got one that comes to mind here? Maybe one in this game.
I'm going to go Nino Niederreiter.
Nino Niederreiter. All right. I like the call. I will go with, I like Brock Besser, $6,200 Besser. And then kind of your favorite goalie of the night.
Oh, Lankinen by a mile.
Okay. Yeah, just the volume. I like Lankinen. I'll throw in Demko. I'm going to have a lot of Demko with my Vancouver stack. So going for the correlation play and just cheap. Wenberg, Hattie, I sure hope not. Although I will not have 0% Wenberg. I'll tell you that.
If Wenberg Hatties, I won't even be around for late lock.
Yeah, just drinking yourself into oblivion. Yeah. All right. Well, that was a fun show. Late news is going to be important. Anything else to add here, Cliffy, before we head out?
Not at all. Just be around for tomorrow because Josh and I are on.
All right. That'll be at 3 Eastern normal time. Tune into those guys. Catch this show on podcast. We'll also have that show tomorrow up on podcast shortly after its completion. Thanks to Tyler for producing. Thanks to you all for watching. Hit the subscribe button on the way out. Helps us out a ton. And good luck in your contests tonight.